Welcome to the Atheist Podcast. I'm Erin.
And I'm Kelley. Atheist is where we will explore American cultural trends through the lenses of a devout theist
And a devout atheist. We will discuss the messiness of being human.
the latest in social science, psychology, and American culture.
And what any of it has to do with Homo sapiens' longtime preoccupation with religion.
Hey, Erin.
Hey, Kelley.
Wow.
Yeah, that was great. It was a
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
great interview.
Yeah, they're working so hard
I know.
with so little.
Yeah.
With so little. And
And the need is so great.
the need is so great.
I knew about Bridge of Hope because I knew Deb had been connected to them for a while. I remember we had the paper. I had the paper. We did a story about it. Some of the students from Clayton that had gone and
Right.
down there, but I didn't. I think I just understand what it is and what they're doing in such a different context now.
Yep.
That it's really important work.
Yeah, and and something we were talking about kind of after the interview too is just that it just feels so frustrating that in a city that is known for its like amazing hospitals, its amazing medical school, and like St. Louis is the place you come, right? If you need medical care, and yet there's a whole population of people who
Yeah,
Who are-
that this is true. This is true.
Yeah.
At the same time, the emergency room is a shit show,
right.
and for so many reasons. But it is one of those windows into recognizing that these organizations. It's kind of like when you're a kid and you're like, oh, everything just works, right?
Right.
And then as you
Yeah.
get older, you're like, oh no, it doesn't work.
It
at all.
doesn't work. But there are ways that we can actually make
Yeah,
it work
make it better
and make it better. But people are like, well, this is the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
But I think also the statistics that we are the largest city that doesn't have this kind of medical respite is pretty surprising.
Yeah, you just and it creates just a really unfortunate and very expensive cycle. That is for taxpayers. Like there's just that's what I just kept thinking of. It's like there's so many ripple effects here that are important.
I mean, if you've ever taken your kid or in the middle of the night to the ER and you've had to wait for 47 hours, chances are, your wait wouldn't be as long if there was medical respite.
Yeah. If there were more resources to get people help, and so some of the things that they were talking about, it's stuff that on the surface it seems really basic and straightforward, like cleanliness, for example.
Yeah.
But that honestly make a huge difference from like a medical standpoint. So my wife will talk about as physicians and nurses that they can tell a lot about the health of a patient just by looking at their feet.
Wow.
And it's so, for example, like if you have a homeless patient or unhoused patient, and they'll have patients that will come in that won't have taken their socks or shoes off for months sometimes, right?
Sure, because they're out in the cold.
And if they
can't.
if they get an infection or something's going on, like things can go very badly. So like one of the things that they kind of figure out or learn as they're going through their training is like when you take somebody's socks off, you kind of pull and then kind of move out of the way because it might be accompanied with a cloud of skin or maybe a toe.
Oh my God.
It can be pretty, I mean, because, if somebody who's, has had their shoes on for 4 months might have
frostbite,
necrotic, and it's,
if they have diabetes and they have some kind of
that's
wound
very
that they
common.
haven't
Yep.
tended to. I mean, I can see that happening.
So, but, having a place where you're like having, just the ability to have some of those basic needs met. Yeah.
And also, like they said, like education, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, if somebody's people who sometimes are older or who are just struggling with mental illness or even just like stress and anxiety, not even like full-blown mental illness.
Yeah.
But I mean, just like stress and anxiety, the idea of like organizing your pills
Yeah.
or like this, like wound care, right? Yeah.
So
like
the other anecdote that popped into my head, which I think Deb probably would have appreciated, but I was like, this might derail the conversation. But was a historic example about like how important cleanliness is.
Yeah.
And Lauren and I were watching an episode of Drunk History the other day.
Yeah.
Which is the best. I mean, it's so
it's so good.
funny.
It's so funny.
But they had this episode, or there was like multiple episodes that were all about the American Revolution. And one of them was about this guy, and it was Wilhelm von Steuben. And he was...
I'm already laughing.
I know. He was this like European guy who was gay, and he was out, which was very unusual. And like at the time was living in Paris and had already fled from whatever country he was in because they were, like you
Sounds
can't live
like he's
here.
German.
Yeah, what was it? He was
Von Steuben,
Prussian.
Okay.
And so he was in France, and then I think it was, I can't remember if it was Benjamin Franklin. I don't know. One of those people, right? Was
have a little more wine.
Right. Was like, hey, we really, because this guy was known for military training. And he's like, our soldiers, we need help with, we need some expertise, right? And so he was like, oh, I don't know, I'm pretty happy here in Paris, and then the French were like, no, you can't live here either. And so the Americans,
because you're gay?
Yeah. And
wow.
but because the Americans were desperate, they're like, you can come
you
help
can come
us.
here.
Yeah.
Later we'll tell you can't be here.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he came to America and like totally retrained the military. And one of the things that he was like that was really instrumental was just like general cleanliness to keep people from getting sick.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, y'all need to clean yourselves, know.
Yeah.
But just the impact that had actually in the overall performance of the regimen was like, and they were so thrilled because of this man's contributions that they gave him a house to like live in with his significant other. Yeah. Isn't that great? Isn't that a great story?
So don't ask, don't tell was not the thing. Then there's a deep history of, hey.
I know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a crazy story.
I know. It's funny.
And
I love it's on Drunk History. It's the best show.
Yeah.
We had some friends which we needed to like bring this back because, and actually one of those friends listens to this show, so this will be a reminder. We're like, we got to do this again. But they used to host these Drunk History dinner parties, and they would be like, okay, like before the dinner, you have a theme, and then everybody has to do their own research and kind of come up with their own story related to the theme that they would tell, and then you have dinner, and then once you're a little bit deeper into the night, you have to go around and each person tell their story. It was pretty fun.
Are shots involved in this?
I'm sure they were available.
Oh, that's funny.
It's pretty funny. But they do, on that show, I feel like they do give people like, I don't know, I can never tell if I'm like, are they just acting that drunk
no.
or they're that drunk?
No, they give people like, they get people drunk for sure. For sure. Oh my gosh. Well, speaking of dinner party, I feel like I think that's my my way of, I feel like I could have a dinner party and like tell everybody about, Bridge of Hope and like,
I had the same thought. Yeah.
Let's raise some money.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways that people can, help
contribute and get involved. I know. Yeah. And such a great example of an organization that could have such an important impact here, right here in St. Louis, and help people, going back to the very first episode when, like how change happens.
Yeah.
And some of the examples that they gave, being able to help somebody restructure their environment so that they can get sober. I mean,
that was,
and that's kind of exactly what we were talking about.
Yes.
Like it's habitual, it's in the environment. Like,
Yeah.
I can't get out of this cycle. And then to be able to have an organization that isn't a rehab that I have to pay for,
Right.
that can help me get that down that path. I mean, that's huge.
Huge. Yeah, I thought that was so interesting, that anecdote, and based on what we were talking about earlier. Yeah, because making those atomic habits, those small changes, right? I mean, in order to make some of those changes, you got to have some resources.
Yeah.
I mean, we all look at Oprah and are like, well, yeah, it's easy to be Oprah when you have that much money. You know what I mean? Or we look at people who are like celebrities and beautiful and thin and healthy and whatever. And it's like, yeah, they have a chef, or yeah, they have this or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, just for us to say, oh, I can quit smoking because I can change my environment, or because I can.
Yeah, he talks about probably one of the, so a couple things, like like if it's something you're, trying to do, and something that you're trying to stop, right? Like you're using different sides of maybe the same mechanism, maybe is the way to think about it. But like, so one of the things that he talks about is in the book, James Clear, is that, so if it's a habit that you are trying to do, that you can do, they call it habit stacking. And so it's like, okay, what's this thing that you already do? And stack the thing that you're trying to do on top of it.
Connect it.
Yeah. And then whatever it is like that you're not trying to do, to create more friction, right? So it's taking the cookies off the counter, right? Or like if you're saying, hey, I want to watch less TV. Like when you stop watching an episode of TV, you log out of all with your passwords on Netflix.
Yeah.
So that means you have to put your password in. And it's just that giving yourself enough time to not, that when that, association, that reinforcement starts, to give yourself that little bit more time to say, do I really want to do this right now?
Right.
Can I do something else?
Well, and that's interesting too, because I know with friends who are in AA, that impulse to either drink or to do whatever it is that we're addicted to.
Yeah.
It takes 3 minutes for that feeling to pass. That's it. 3 minutes.
Interesting.
Yeah. And there's a great book. Oh gosh, he's a mindfulness guy, and I'm not going to remember his name, but a great book that he talks about using mindfulness as in a way to kind of free yourself of addictions. And he talks about smoking and how smoking is such a hard thing to kick. And he asked this guy, he's like, I can't, and then this guy's like, I can't quit. And he goes, well, have you ever been on a plane and wanted a cigarette? He's like, well, yeah. Or on a train, or in a hospital, in a place where you absolutely can't smoke. Yeah. And he's like, well, yeah. And he's like, well, what do you do when you get that craving? And he goes, well, I can't do anything, so I just wait. And he goes, do you feel that craving for the entire flight? And he's like, no. He's like, right. Because it escalates, it like, has this kind of climax, and then it goes away.
Yeah, that's
so
interesting.
Just like logging out of your app or whatever, and giving yourself that much more space to do it, just gives you that much more time for that impulse or that kind of craving to dissipate.
Yeah, to come down from the peak of whatever, that associative connection that has been made.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Okay, I'm going to say something super cynical. So, I was really struck by what Deb said about, when she started doing the tutoring, and she was like, and I just felt like I was just being transformed by it, right?
Yeah,
and she's like, I've been changed so much more than I feel like I've, helped other people, and I, I'm thinking about, people who are trying to keep us from this kind of work, who have a vested interest in our attention being on this kind of national level, being distracted by politics in these kind of big ways where we can't really have much influence other than, our vote. But when they keep us out of these local and grassroots organizations, they're keeping us from really changing and seeing the world in new ways, right? That are then maybe going to affect the way we vote or affect the way that we interact, in the world. And so, I mean, I think it sounds pretty cynical, but I think it's true.
It is. Well, it works on a couple of levels too. Like, so that distraction, it could be like distraction in that, like, hey, I'm like maliciously trying to get you to think about these words that people are trying to use for good, to like think of them in a different way, right? There's that. But there's also just the distraction element, which is like, I'm sort of just like passively observing all of this information, like scrolling through stuff. And then all of a sudden, like 2 hours of my day have been occupied with this, right? And it's because it's time. It's like, I have, 4,000 weeks, right? Oliver Berkman, or however much time, our time is limited. And if I'm spending it being distracted by stuff that like I can't really affect, that, I don't know how it makes you feel, but I can't think it makes you feel very whole.
No.
And then it's then, where you could be like, wow, I could be spending this time really contributing to something that's meaningful in my community. It's right there. But we live in a culture that, but it's like also like, well, how would I even know that it exists, right? And so I mean, which is what they were talking about, right? It's like their biggest problem is awareness, and getting that awareness now. And the only people that are really going to be aware, right, that need exists are the people that they're serving, who certainly aren't going to have like huge platforms from which to communicate, hey, this would be really helpful. And then, I mean, the medical institutions would have the awareness, and then it's, maybe they're distracted because of whatever else
because they're busy taking care of everybody. Yeah.
Well, and even just like you think about, you have the individual doctors, but then let's say you have these hospital administrators and things like that. Like there's so many things that the doctors and nurses on the ground talk about that they bring up to their leadership that don't necessarily things don't always change for the better,
Right.
But this would be something that would be really helpful to them, I know for sure. So, the other thing I was thinking about too was, you mentioned Deb, kind of her why or her mission, and I was really moved by Kelly's comment about the way that she articulated her why. And as she was speaking, I was like thinking to myself, this is what the most positive version of social justice, like what that is exactly, that's the definition, right? Which is like, dignity for all people, and wanting to work towards a world that meets that. So I was really, I thought that was really moving, touching.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. They both are really amazing women, and really live out their values, in the way that they move through the world and make choices. I also was thinking too, when Deb was saying, this kind of, I understand, by loving these people who walk into the doors of Bridge of Hope, and by learning how to love them, because it wasn't just wasn't coming easy. She had to kind of put some judgment aside, and that took a little time. But then in doing that, she said, in learning how to love the people who come in, she's like, it was transforming the way I was able to kind of interact and know God and love God. And there's my favorite verse, and I'm sure I've talked about this, is in 1 John, where basically the whole thing is, God is love. And if you want to know who God is, you need to love your neighbor. If you want to know what it is to love God, or you want to know what it feels like to be loved by God, then basically the only thing you need to do is just love the people around you. And not just the people that are close to you, but loving the people that are difficult to love.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, there is something absolutely transformational in doing that. And again, that's kind of the messiness and the grittiness of working and acting in a hands-on, in-person way, as opposed to just kind of outsourcing your philanthropy or outsourcing your your rage against whatever is the injustice,
right.
But doing it with people right there in front of you, who you need to take their sock off, and you know what, their toe may fall off.
Yeah,
that's right. I mean, that it doesn't get any more gritty than that.
It's pretty gritty,
right?
And it's true.
And that's
true.
what they're doing.
Gosh, and you do think, just as you were saying that, I think about all of those just those dramatic appeals to those political donation and that are working on our tribal natures to pour, unbelievable sums of money into these folks are like, hey, we've raised $400,000. We're trying to get to $2 million so that we can take care of real humans that exist in your community and are just need help. That Bridge of Hope, right? Need that little bit of help to make it to this next place in their life where they can hopefully get their feet under them and be able to live with dignity.
That is such a small amount. That is such a small amount. $2 million. I mean, I know it's a big amount, but when we're talking about sometimes, it's
it made me wish I had that I was a billionaire and I could be you know what? I'll just give it to you right now.
But there are so many people. There are so many people who, who could just write a check.
Yeah.
I remember there was, this might be a little side story, but I remember when August Wilson, the playwright, his 10th and last play of his decade cycle, he was doing 100 years of plays, one for every decade of the African American experience, and it was this last one, and it was being produced on Broadway, which all of them had been, and they needed $1 million, and they couldn't raise $1 million to put on, the basically the greatest living playwright's last play of this. And I remember I dreamt about it. I was so angry. I was like, somebody could write a check for that tomorrow. Yeah. Why is nobody doing this?
Yeah.
This is a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel the same way about this. And and they shared with us too that it's this $2 million that they need to kind of get the doors open. And then once the doors are open and they start going, I mean, the money is going to pour in, and the infrastructure is going to grow, and the beds, they're going to be able to have more beds, and it's going to be expandable into rural areas and South St. Louis and East St. Louis, and that's great. But it's we just need that.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking about they mentioned the opportunity to do an open house and things like that, but to get people there in person and see it, it's I know it's a lot to ask, but when you do, and you should, right, do that, is they're talking about the Ville neighborhood. I've had a couple opportunities to go on historic tours in the Ville, and there's so many places, and she referenced a few of them. So Homer G. Phillips, the hospital, though she was talking about, and there's the house, which is the Shelley versus Kramer Supreme Court case. That house is there. There's just so many there's tons of famous people and famous landmarks in that area. So you should it was sometime go and see some of them and visit Bridge of Hope.
Yeah, for sure. And it is, and honestly it's it is like, it's not out of the way.
No, it's not. It's really
like
not.
you're probably close to there right now if
Yeah.
you're listening to this on the radio.
Yeah.
You could probably get
Yeah,
there
if you're in the
10
St.
minutes.
Louis.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, this is great. And hopefully, we'll be able to kind of reference the story as we move on and give people updates on what's going
revisit
on.
it. Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, thanks for coordinating this.
Yeah.
It was great to meet those guys. Or, I mean, I already knew Deb, but it was great to meet Kelley and hear their stories.
Yeah. Oh, awesome.
So, thanks, Kelley.
Yeah, thank you, Erin. We are always appreciative of our listeners. Thank you so much for listening. We do have a favor to ask, though. If you're liking Atheist, and clearly you are, please share it with a few friends. We're looking to grow a lot in 2024. More topics, more interviews, more episodes in general. But we need your help to make that happen.
We are not asking you to contribute any money, just a few minutes of your time to share this episode, maybe on a social media post, or better yet, while you're visiting with a friend. Every new listener really helps us out. If you have any topic suggestions, questions, or thoughts on the show, feel free to write us at atheist@stlpodcast.com.
Atheist is produced by Justin Seiwell and Trend Media STL. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at STL Podcasts.
Thank you for listening, and keep looking for connection.